The stage is set. When I whoop this man, I want to be declared by all as the greatest of all time.
That's right.
Because the stage is set. I'm 32 years old. My legs are gone. This man is strong. You talking about how great he was, and now we're going to see.
I said no, I'm tired. They say yes, you can. Push me to the fire. I said that you're the man. I said no, I'm tired. They say yes, you can. Push me to the fire. I said that you're the man.
Let's toast to the new age Superman. Fly around the globe and leave home to do shows. All 24 hours is a week for most. Toast to the new age Superman. Fly around the globe, leave home to do shows. All 24 hours is a week for more. Still got a smile, even when I feel let down. I just gotta live ready. I put the world on my shoulders before I left out. It was way too heavy. How dare you be tired, let alone stressed out? Man, you're on the telly, and how can you moan about rolling around? Ain't you got a Bentley? Let me show you where I get lost. When I get picked up, then I jet off. Then I get picked up when I get off. Straight to the hotel like get washed. Do interviews and press shots. Then I hit the venue, get my wretch on. Feeling hungry, looking at the restaurant. But we gotta rush for our flight, gotta get gone.
Being hip, man. I'll tell you something really quickly that I don't think that I'm a particularly hip person. I do the Big Brothers Big Sisters program, and I love it. It's so much fun. I have a little 10-year-old little brother named Nazir, and he's always telling me, you need to get more hip, Ryan. And I have no idea what he means.
When I think of hip, I think of people like Miles and Dizzy and Sly and folks like that are on the cutting edge.
I believe that being hip will most likely be knowing what will be popular in the next 5 years.
To my old self, being hip is kind of more like being yourself, doing what you like to do as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else.
This topic of hip, to me, what it made me think of are people in my life that I wanted to be like.
I think hip is anything that's in style and season and fashion, anything that's cool.
I think being hip is kind of being on the edge, kind of being out on the fringe past not necessarily what's cool, not necessarily what's popular, but being like on the edge, doing the things that are considered to be hip or in style at the time. And things that are hip move away really quickly. So, that's the style, it's the trend. It gets adapted by a ton of people who want to be hip. And then all of a sudden there's a new style on the fringe that's past that, and that's what's hip now. So I think being hip is always being on the fringe, always being just right there on the cusp of what's about to break in and become really popular or really trendy or something like that.
Yeah, I do think there is definitely a difference there. I always have thought of cool as being much more laid back, and hip as being more, somewhat of the time. So I don't know that they're necessarily. I suppose there's some overlap, but I've always thought of cool people as being the more laid back of the hip people.
Yes, because cool people aren't necessarily hip, but they're just cool. For instance, I would probably say Steve Jobs was cool, but I don't necessarily would call him hip, just because he did march to his own drummer. I mean, that's the whole reason Apple started.
Hipness probably has a little bit more of an edge to it, a little bit more of a mystery to it, but in terms of just someone who's hip is also cool. Maybe something beyond that. Most of the people I know want to be cool. And when I think about hip, I essentially think of being cool as well. And hip may be different, but from my point of view, the differences would be kind of subtle.
So cool to me has always been what's popular, right? It's the cool kids table, like it's the jocks maybe or the mainstream stuff. Whatever is cool is what's going to get you accepted by other people that you label as cool. And I think that's always what I've considered cool is. Cool is an acceptance. Cool is being able to attain that status to where other people are going to say, you're cool enough that we accept you into this social group or this social group, or really just the larger, broader social group of people that aren't total outcasts. Being hip, on the other hand, doesn't necessarily mean that you're cool. Being hip means that you're kind of on the fringe of something really trendy, something that might become cool, but you're kind of past that. You're kind of looking forward to the innovative part of the future.
There's something about the word hip that seems slightly outdated. I don't know if that is clear. I feel like your grandmother or someone would say that's hip, but I think someone younger, our generation, would say that's cool.
I'm trying to think who else is cool in my mind. I guess I'm kind of cool. I'm not hip. I mean, I'm interested in a lot of stuff, and I want to learn things, and I'm pretty attuned to what's going on around me. So I think you can be cool and not be hip.
Definitely. I think cool would mean, like in the present, would just be like assimilating to what is popular, or being able to embrace what is popular so other people could just have a positive self-image about you. Whereas hip is not afraid to go against the grain and do what you feel best.
When I think of coolness and hipness, I think almost like less being more. Only moving to the extent necessary, only saying what you need to say, and being very effective.
It is befitting that I leave the game just like I came in, beating a big bad monster who knocks out everybody and no one can whoop him. That's when that little Cassius Clay from Louisville, Kentucky came up and stopped Sonny Liston, the man who annihilated Floyd Patterson twice. He was going to kill me. But he hit harder than George. His reach was longer than George. He's a better boxer than George. And I'm better now than I was when you saw that 22-year-old undeveloped kid running from Sonny Liston.
As a boxing fan, as an avid boxing fan, I can tell you, Ali is the living embodiment of the word hip. He broke the rules. He was loud. He changed the game. He was a thrill to watch fight. He was this big personality, and people wanted to emulate his personality. They wanted to be like this weird, mysterious guy who used to be named Cassius Clay and joined the Nation of Islam. He's doing all these wild things, and he's so hip. And people look back, it's kind of like Richard Sherman's big outburst after the NFC. Was it the NFC or the AFC? NFC, right? The NFC Championship game. Yeah, and he has this big outburst. And immediately people are chastising him. The first thing I think of is, this is nothing new. I mean, we had this guy 50 years ago named Muhammad Ali who was shouting and being proud and taunting people, and he was getting the same kind of criticism that, oh, he's uneducated, he's a thug. No, people like that. They like this big personality in sports. And so I think Ali is a great example. Sherman's a good example of a contemporary person who could be seen as really a hip person, someone who's willing to be outspoken.
Muhammad Ali and hip. He sure was in his day. Absolutely. Again, there's certainly sports figures from each era that I think portray that, just like musicians from each era. And I think Muhammad Ali in his day was, as sports figures in that era, I can't think of anybody who was emulated more and had more of an effect on young people than Muhammad Ali did.
Because someone had brought up the fact that they didn't think he was that great, and I was like, just shut up. Just get out of my face. You don't know boxing.
And you, George Foreman, all of you chumps are going to bow when I whoop him. All of you. I know you got him. I know you got him picked, but the man's in trouble. I'm going to show you how great I am.
Hipness and coolness means you're going to be effective. You're going to carry it off, and you're going to do it in style.
The whole central component of what made Ali, which was his mouth, right? The Louisville lip.
I'm experienced now, professional. Jaw's been broke, been lost, knocked down a couple times. Bad. Been chopping trees. I done something new for this fight. I done wrestled with an alligator. That's right. I have wrestled with an alligator. I done tussled with a whale. I done handcuffed lightning, throw thunder in jail. That's bad. Only last week, I murdered a rock, injured a stone, hospitalized a brick. I'm so mean, I make medicine sick.
Bad dude.
Bad.
Ain't no doubt.
Fast. Fast. Last night I cut the light off in my bedroom, hit the switch, was in the bed before the room was dark.
Incredible.
Fast.
All you ever see about Ali most of the time is this focus on him from circa like 1963 through his eventual suspension from boxing, I think in 1967. That's really that 4-year time period where he knocks out Sonny Liston, beats Floyd Patterson, knocks out Sonny Liston again, not in that order, just naming some things off, beats up a bunch of guys in 1966, I think he beat 6 people, and he's every time, and he's running his mouth, he's got all this stuff going on, he's drawing attention, he's speaking out against oppression, against segregation, and the whole time that he's doing this, he's getting all this attention, and that's when he's speaking in rhymes and doing all these hip things. And so I think if you're looking for why people are always focused on that, that's why. It's because that's the hip Ali. That's the Ali everybody really remembers.
Guten Abend, liebe Freunde, seid ihr alle mal gut drauf. Heute feiern wir eine Fete und wir hören niemals auf.
You know, I think people sometimes are trying to create hip. You know, I'm sure that people like Lady Gaga and the Black Eyed Peas and folks of that ilk probably think they're creating hip, and I'm sure that they do to some extent because they have that kind of influence now. And I don't know that if people like Miles were creating it or were just coming to it or picking up on nuances of society that they were seeing and what they were experiencing. It's just, you know, it's an interesting question.
Wanna live, wanna drift with the vibe. Wanna feel, wanna know that pride. Wanna get real occupied. Wanna cut that pie. Wanna take it into your...
Hip hop's probably the best example, right? It has the word hip right in the name, and it's always kind of been, I think, the genre most associated with the word hip for sure. Also because it's always so innovative, and it is a young man's game.
Backpack, fuck that. I was always hanging with the thugs at. I was always hanging with the Rugrats. Someone come and show me where the drugs at. Someone come and pop on a hot song, mean my shit, get an iPhone, take a video, I'll make it last song, get some popcorn, cause I murder every single instrumental that I get.
That might influence what's hip, because most hip people are usually younger people or people who are associated as being with younger people. And I think that's probably part of it. I mean, every year it seems like there's a new YouTube sensation rapper. I remember when I was in high school, it was Mac Miller. He was the guy. Like, when we were seniors in high school, Mac Miller was on everyone's computer screen, and we couldn't believe who this person was, and he was the hippest guy, and we all wanted to be Mac Miller, you know. We just wished that we had chosen to rap all the time instead of do high school stuff, right? And I think hip-hop's probably it. And it's the same thing. It goes on and on. It's almost like every year there's a new young gun who's changing the genre or doing the music differently. And it's a very hip, innovative genre.
In einem schwarzen Fotoalbum mit nem silbernen Knopf bewahre ich alle diese Bilder im Kopf. Ich weiß noch, damals als ich jung und wild war im Block. Ich bewahre mir diese Bilder im Kopf. In einem schwarzen Fotoalbum mit nem silbernen Knopf bewahre ich alle diese Bilder im Kopf. Ich weiß noch, als wir das erste Mal gechillt haben im Loch. Ich bewahre mir diese Bilder im Kopf.
My favorite, Kanye West. I feel like he's a hipster. He goes against the grain. He does things that's unusual to hip hop and music in general.
That's how long I've been on ya.
In general, with his samples, with his just innovative techniques as a producer as well as a lyricist. So definitely Kanye West.
Today, I think of Ravi Coltrane and several groups, again, being the jazz guy here, when I'm playing the Niles Klein Singers, like one of the groups, or Brad Maldew, or some of these cutting edge guys in jazz. I certainly know the hip and the cool guys in jazz from the traditional guys. So there definitely is something that you immediately key into that separates the groups. So yes, absolutely.
I guess they were the original hipsters, and I can get behind that because they were cool. Charlie Parker and all those people. I would definitely associate jazz with being hip. One of the stuff they're playing too much these days would be considered hip. Going back to your previous question about being cool, I think bluegrass is cool. I know a lot of people who consider themselves hip listen to bluegrass. The Punch Brothers, which have been around for years. It's all those folks. So I guess there is some music, but I definitely think jazz is the original hip music.
I think NDRE is definitely hip.
Little girl with the pressing curl. Age 8, I got a Jerry curl. 13 and I got a relaxer. I was a source of so much.
I think she's hip because now that I have that definition that you all said in my head, I think she totally fits that because she's just different. You know, she's very different. She brings something completely different to the table that you won't see. That's why you don't see her on mainstream or hear her on mainstream as much, I think, because she just brings a different style. She embraces very much who she is, being, you know, African American, being natural, but also not even just being those things, being inclusive, being globally minded, because she does music with people from all over the world. She'll travel the world to get inspiration for a song. So I don't know. I think she's definitely hip.
I think it's one of those things that you know it when you hear it, and I don't think it's necessarily something where, you know, again, is I guess my position in this is the jazz guy. You know, I would like to say it's jazz, but I certainly hear other kind of world music and electronica and things like that. That I certainly think of that as being hip or cool or words of that ilk.
One day the center had invited Dexter Gordon. When I think back of someone being cool and hip, he was sort of halfway through his performance, and it was in the evening, and there were a number of sets, and at various points I was playing different roles. I wanted to be in there watching all the time, but I also had to be selling the drinks. We were selling Cokes. Not Coke, just Cokes. And and so people came out to get drinks, and at some point, Dexter Gordon sauntered out, and he was playing a long set, which had a number of solos from the different guys, and he sort of apparently must have just walked off the stage for a while, and he glided over to where I was selling drinks. It's almost like he was not really spending any effort to move. He just was moving. And he was carrying his sax, and he came over, and I knew he wanted a drink. He didn't have to ask for it. This is why I'm talking about minimal verbiage. I gave him a drink. He didn't even thank me. He just sort of nodded his head a little bit as if to say thanks, but he knew he didn't have to say it. Right, and he had the drink and what he needed, and without hurrying, he moved back. It was sort of a side entrance to the church area where the performance was going on, and he must have just moved right back onto stage when it was his turn to pick things up again, you know. And I didn't see that, unfortunately, but I heard it, and so. I think that guy is one cool customer.
Are we talking about hipsters who are kind of like the prototypical, I guess, faux hip? It's very much about how they look, how they dress, what they drink, what they carry. So the act of being hip has kind of moved them away from being individuals into joining this collective, and which is funny, because when you talk to somebody about being hip, they really, in my experience, push themselves to being an individual, but then they're in this whole subculture that's very conformist.
Yeah, I think so. I think that if you're faking it, people are going to figure that out pretty quickly. If you just, if I started a career as an MC, because I have this secret hidden rap talent that nobody knows about, and I rapped about coming up hard on the streets, I think everyone would basically say that would be ridiculous, and I would never, succeed or be hip, because everyone would just say that I'm a phony. So I think you do need that sense of authenticity. You need that sense of this is a person who really knows what they're talking about to be hip.
Well, again, I'm sure in their own minds they're going for something very different. I'm sure the traditional guys see themselves as being more scholarly and probably, again, would probably have a fist fight with you over whether they were cool or hip. But and I imagine the other guys that are doing more avant-garde or less traditional music probably think of themselves as being very hip. So, it's probably a state of mind.
Maybe. It's one of those members only type of things, I believe. So most likely to fully understand, I feel like anybody could have like a definition of it, but to understand it and to actually live it, you would need to be it.
Yeah, I mean, and they've even gone down to bourbon. I've been a bourbon drinker for a long time, and certain bourbons, you can see it like good bourbons that were $15 a bottle are now like $20 and $25 because they're all drinking it. The bourbon that I like now, there's two that I guess the hip people drink. One is the Old Forester's ones, which were, when I was younger, you wouldn't touch them. I mean, they've done something with the formula, but now all the hipsters want to drink Old Forester, and they also want to drink, the W.L. Weller Antique, which is, again, it was like used to be $15 and now it's $20. It's a really good bourbon, but they discovered it and it's theirs. And I was like, okay. So I guess that's the other thing that kind of things in when I think of people who consider themselves hip, they think it's theirs and they don't want anybody else to share in that. So it's just it's really strange.
Blues is the same deal. Old school blues musicians who come up all the time, especially back in the day, they needed that authentic kind of upbringing that you need for blues. You need that hard things to sing about or things that you just need to get off your chest, kind of deal with blues singers, country especially too. Thinking too electronic music out of the UK, just thinking of the underground punk and breakbeat culture there, you kind of need that sense of authenticity that you are really a punk or that you're really a person who buys into this. You're not just faking it, you're not just part of the scene, that kind of deal. So I think having a real authenticity, living the life, is what makes people hip and makes people want to follow them and do the things that they're innovating.
I admire your luck, Mr.
Bond. James Bond.
Growing up, I think about James Bond, and especially Sean Connery. Sean Connery was cool in a lot of ways that I think would also be similar to what hip means. He didn't say more than he needed to say, but he was very effective and competent.
I don't think literature is exempted. I just might not know of any literature I would consider that.
Well, every decade it's like a new Bob Dylan thing, right? It's like, well, I knew Bob Dylan in the 80s. Well, I knew Bob Dylan in the 50s.
Yeah, indie films, I guess, would be what you'd call hip, the independent filmmakers. And there's some good stuff out there.
But I just think that kind of thing is hip, like the whole vampire, zombie, sci-fi stuff, I think is really hip.
Now, I defy you to find anything cooler than that. That's all.